I'm JJ Walsh here in Hiroshima, and today I'm talking with Naomichi Hiro Terazaki-san. Thank you so much for joining.
Hi, good evening, Joy. Thanks for having me on your program.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. So you are connected with Rochelle Cup and Marianne Hara. You are all campaigning for the SAVE JINGU GAIEN project. So maybe we'll start with that, and then we'll talk a bit more about some of your other topics. So how did you
Yes.
get involved with SAVE JINGU GAIEN?
Well, okay, I have some update. And I think Marian Hara, about 2 weeks ago, when she appeared on your show, she explained about our campaign. And prior to that, Rochelle, the leader in our team, spoke on your program on a couple of occasions. But since we made a press conference at Tokyo Metropolitan Government Press Office, Press Club, then actually I just received from Rochelle another shocking news that let me, I just got this message from Rochelle, but there was let me read this out. Okay, on January the 30th, just 3 days ago, there was a general meeting of the Environmental Assessment Council of Tokyo government, which were held for the redevelopment of Jingu Gaien, obviously for that purpose. However, just prior to that meeting, Governor Koike-san approved the construction start notification, which was submitted on January the 17th. And almost at the same time, the ICOMOS, Japan National Committee, reported to the governor of Tokyo and to the assembly that the Metropolitan Environment Assessment Council, that a large number of false reports and materials have been submitted. This is how ICOMOS claimed. But even before that, prior to that, Koike-san already has approved the construction start notification. But the story doesn't end here. I think they are still, in the process of considering, and it's unusual, but according to this email I received from Rochelle, but they are actually reconvening the council meeting to reconsider. That is how where it stands now. So I think we urge the audience and whoever is interested in this Jingu Gaien project to raise their voice, his or her voice, and write to perhaps the developer, Mitsui Fudosan, and make their point. We really urge people who are interested in to do so.
Yeah. So if
Thank you, Joy.
maybe they can still sign up on the campaign website, the Save Jingu Gaien, and add their voices there. And if they can, write directly to the developer and add their voices as well. Keep sharing the information. That's a really good
Yes,
way, right?
Rochelle will be keep, everybody updated with the development. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank you.
but
Thank you for all the work you're doing. I know
mm,
it's frustrating and it seems like you're having lots of setbacks, but it's not
mm.
over till it's over, right?
We are not just brutally, against. We like the government and the governor to sit back and reconsider whatever, just to save, not cutting like 900 trees, or there may be a way to avoid that. Not all 950 may not be saved, but there may be a way to preserve the beauty of Jingu Gaien particularly those ginkgo tree avenue. That is it's big tourist attraction, not only for locals and not only for Japanese tourists, but a lot of foreign overseas tourists coming to Tokyo, coming to Japan, attracted by this spot. So, well, I hope we can, continue working and raising our voice to reach the
Yeah.
decision makers in the government. Yeah.
We need more preservation of old growth trees, not cutting down and making more concrete. Less concrete, more trees, right?
Mm.
Thank you so much. So let's go back a little bit into your history. You studied in London. You were studying international sea law. Is that right?
Right, right. See, yes. Actually, that was like 1975. I was a postgraduate PhD student in London. Even those days, we are talking about uh, common heritage of mankind, how to preserve the marine resources, and not only living resources, but also mineral resources. Yeah, those days we are talking about who has the right to those deep sea manganese nodules, which contains a lot of mangan, copper, cobalt, nickel. So without any framework under the United Nations, those resources may be exploited by only a handful of developed nations with technologies. Now, imagine 1970s, 75, not many developing countries now are not even, maybe some of countries are not even independent, may not be. So only a handful of Western or North American sort of countries have technology to exploit. And, so UN was sort of asked to sort of have international mechanism under which those resources will be protected. Otherwise, there will be like colonization of the seabed, which we experienced in like 2, 3 centuries ago. Only handful of developed nations colonized the rest of the world. So that was sort of concept of common heritage of mankind was actually it came from ambassador from Maltese ambassador to the UN, like way back in 1960s. He actually used this common heritage expression, common heritage of mankind, at the UN forum. And
Wow, that's amazing. I spoke with a journalist and researcher who started an organization called the Outlaw Ocean, and he was talking about how difficult it is to have law
mm,
on the open sea. Nobody is in control when it's out on the ocean. And I think now we have a lot of issues with deep sea mining and maybe similar kinds of issues. Who has the right to deep sea mining, right? Who has the right to those minerals, and what damage can we cause by doing this new technology, right? So there's a lot of, like you're asking about Jingu Gaien, I think we need to pause and reassess what's the most fair way to move
mm,
forward
mm.
for these new ideas too, right?
Well, very good. The right to those resources, mineral resources. Yeah, of course, after this conference, conference on law of the sea, they actually UN adopted a convention, UN Convention on the Law of the Sea in 1982, under which uh, any coastal states can claim up to 200 miles EEZ, exclusive economic zone, but not territorial waters. Mm. So it's different. In territorial waters, you have the same rights as if you were on land. So you have exclusive right to everything, but easy, it's limited. But before that, some countries claimed 200-mile territorial waters, particularly the Latin American states, were claiming for 200-mile territorial waters. So this 82 convention actually, when it entered into force, there was chaotic situation, one claiming only 12-mile territorial waters, other states claiming 3-mile territorial waters, and some others, the extremists, claiming 200-mile territorial waters. So under new convention 1982, Law of the Sea UN Convention, coastal states can claim up to 12-mile territorial waters and 200 miles EEZ, exclusive economic zone. So it's situations in order, but still some problems and some uncertainty about.
So you started with the oceans, and then you were working for a long time in hospitality and tourism, and talking about CSR. And then more recently, it sounds like you're working on biofuels for the aviation industry and SAF. You've really worked in a lot of different areas. Should we talk a little bit about CSR? I was reading one of your presentations, and you were saying in terms of ESG, Japan is quite strong for the environmental side, but quite weak for the social side and the governance side. And so Japan could really benefit from keeping to international regulation standards. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, traditionally, Japan is very sort of strong in environmental protection, right? Because we have technology, that one reason. And, the Japanese companies, corporate, do whatever is decided, and it is a hard law. They comply with the laws, rules and regulations. But when it comes to soft law, it's not like it's not the law, but it's international tendency, or international societies moving toward that direction. Japanese companies very hesitant to comply with or follow those. So long as there is a hard law in environmental protection, it's all laws, rules and regulations, and Japanese companies follow. But the social aspect, exactly, you've been in Japan for quite some time. So how few Japanese female members of parliament are, how few Japanese women are in the corporate board of directors, all this. We talk about the empowerment of women, but it's so long as it's law and hard law, companies will follow, comply. But the social aspect is not quite, hard law. In many aspects, it is recommended. It is maybe becoming a law in the near future, but at the moment it's not law. So long as it's not binding, they are not perhaps following actively. So that is sort of problem is Japanese corporate mentality. Yeah.
So the $1 million question is, should Japan have a law, compulsory equality in your governance inside the company? So all top management, you have to have 20% women in management, or the top of the government, you have to have at least 20%. Now, all other countries that have done a quota, they all said before they did it, oh, it's impossible, we can't do that. But once they did it, they have found a way to have a better balance. Do you think Japan is at a point now where we really need to have that compulsory quota to make change?
Right. Yeah, I think it's compulsory. It's important keyword. Yeah, it have to be compulsory. Otherwise, the corporate decision makers will not follow. So have to make it compulsory. You see, some of the Japanese companies now are having uh, female external board members, like Russia Cup. She is, external board member of some companies, or uh, trying to increase the number of female top executives and the board members, but the number is still very, very small, just a small fraction. Where if you look at Scandinavian countries, in like Norway, Finland, almost 50% of the diet parliament members are women. In Japan, it's no, no. In some meetings, you see the the photographs. It's all men in dark suits. So it look for me, it's normal. It's in Japan. I feel it's Japan. But if we show the photograph to foreigners, gaijins, they said, "What is going on? You don't even have a single woman in this company board or in this parliamentary sort of meetings." So I have to change, but I have to be where one is compulsory, and also we need the gaiatsu pressure from outside. That actually historically, unfortunately, it's historically true. The gaiatsu, the first gaiatsu we noticed was Commodore Perry came at the end of Edo era. Uh, is that 1853 or yeah? Commodore Perry came in three warships, and that was the very first sort of guy had to be we sort of realized, but we still need a gaiatsu. Yeah. Mm.
Speaking of gaiatsu, I think that's a perfect segue into tourism and the positive pressure that tourism can have on sustainable change for Japan. But before we talk about that, Ian has joined us from LinkedIn. Thanks for joining, Ian. He says, in my opinion, the flip side of the phrase could likely be the tragedy of the commons. We were talking about ocean rights and who has the rights to the ocean. Basically, what can happen when we use all the resource without thinking about the future potential consequences arising, right?
Mm.
Yeah, very good point. Thanks, Ian. So let's switch gears a little bit, talk a little bit about tourism, because
Hey,
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you see, in like 1970s and 80s, right until such time as the UN Convention on Law of the Sea was adopted and its entire force. But technology was there to exploit deep sea mineral resources from the depth of 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters. But it was far costly than exploiting land-based resources, mineral resources, same like copper, cobalt, nickel from like Chile or Africa. It was far cheaper to exploit and utilize those resources. I think that's a reason why developed countries and their companies, having technology, did not go ahead with actual exploitation because of the financial implications. Because it's, like imagine the exploiting mineral resources from 3,000 meters deep ocean bottom. It is very costly operation. So that was the reason why they deferred from
And that's
doing.
a really important point, right? How can we change the cost mechanism that we use in society to make the good choices more price competitive with the bad choices. At the moment, for example, the industry that you've been working with recently, biodiesel, making reusing used oil to make jet fuel, this should be cheaper or more price competitive with the more damaging fossil fuel, jet fuel, right? So how can we change the way we price things, which will make it more attractive to have the more sustainable choice, would also be really nice to see, right?
Aviation, biofuels. It's you hear about biodiesel. Yeah, biodiesel been in use for quite some time in many countries, but aviation biofuels is sort of more recent. But nowadays, like over 250,000 flights, commercial flights already using uh, small amount of biofuel. But, and of course, Japanese government now have a strategy to introduce biofuels by 2030 to replace the existing aviation fuel, which is called kerosene. 10% of kerosene used for Japanese domestic flight will be replaced by biofuels by 2030, which is a very sort of ambitious target. I don't think I don't think we can materialize that sort of, but
And it's not only Japan, right? According to the information I've been reading about SAF, so Sustainable Air, 10% is Japan's target, but Norway wants 30% by 2030.
so
Singapore is also ramping up operations. They're going to have the biggest production in the world through a Finnish company soon. So this is really big news, isn't it?
yes. Well, let me just give you small tips about for aviation. When it comes to domestic flights, Japan domestic or US domestic, or well, Singapore doesn't have domestic; it's all international. But domestic flight is governed by Paris Agreement, and international flights, from Japan to any country outside of Japan, is governed by United Nations Specialized Agency. There is two separate frameworks, and the international flight is governed by ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, based in Montreal. That is the UN specialized agency. So we have different approaches, and ICAO has the target of reducing greenhouse gas CO2 emission by 2% every year, each year. And also IATA, it's a private association for airlines, International Air Transport Association, IATA. IATA has a similar target, but there is slight difference. And IATA's target is to reduce CO2 emission by 1.5% instead of 2% every year. And by year 2050, we will be reducing 50% of global emission by 2050. So it's very sort again ambitious target, but airlines I think we are in right track and doing their best. So we'll be perhaps meeting this 1.5% reduction each year. And ICAO, UN Specialized Agency for Aviation, has like a more sort of medium-term target which airlines should achieve by 2035. Mm. So airlines following for domestic flight, it's Paris Agreement, and for international flight, it's ICAO sort of target. So it's but biofuel without biofuel, we want airlines, in any countries will achieve this target. So you try to reduce CO2 emission by taking sort of operational. A lot of fuel is consumed while you are at the airport or while you are waiting in the queue for landing, in the line for landing or for departure. A lot of fuel is consumed. Sometimes you'll be flying like hovering over Chicago here for like 45 minutes. That consumes a lot of fuel. That means a lot of greenhouse gases is emitted. So try to, have a better air traffic control, or of course, important to have a new aircraft with new, more fuel sufficient sort of engines. That helps, but that may help maybe 15 to 20% CO2 emission, savings. So the more we are like industry depending upon the use of introduction of biofuels. But at the moment, the price wise, biofuels are far more expensive than existing kerosene. Kerosene prices fluctuate with the price of crude oil. So when the crude oil is like 120 yen to liter, then kerosene is about 110, slightly lower. Mm. But biofuels, depending on which producer from where you purchase, but at the moment, maybe 3 times to 10 times more expensive than
Yeah. Well,
existing.
there's so many interesting issues to consider, right? You mentioned about airport efficiency. Why can't we have electric trucks help taxi the airplanes out to the runway to save on fuel?
Mm,
Why can't we have solar panels on the airport to reduce all the energy costs of running the airport, right?
yep.
It's not just the airplane flying in the sky, but that's a big part of it. So overall, it seems like the aviation industry has between 2 and 4% of the global emissions. And in terms of tourism, it's often the target. How can you have sustainable tourism if everybody's flying to Japan, right? Is often the argument that people say, right? So we always say, well, please stay longer. Don't do a 1 day, 2 day trip. Please stay for 2 weeks. And
Mm,
then you make it more worthwhile, right? But certainly the aviation industry is kind of a target for sustainable tourism. We need to clean up the airplane fuel. So that's been kind of your focus for the last 10 years or so. Is that right? In your career?
well, yeah. Well, you hit the nail right on the head. But yeah, well, some airport doing like solar electricity generation, like on the roof of they have solar panels on the roof of terminal buildings and here and there, and some airlines with some conditions doing one engine taxing. Instead of using both engines, two engines or four engines, using one engine taxing to minimize, to economize the fuel. But for airlines, uh, economizing is important. Economizing fuel means less CO2 emission. And for airline business, more they fly, they have to make business. They more fly, the more CO2 emission they make. So doing business, if you are doing very well means you are exhausting a lot of mm, carbon dioxide. So it's the more you do, the more pollution you're in a way creating. So they have to make efforts. So and they're doing all this strenuous effort using like new navigational sort of improvement to find out the best route to fly to avoid headwind, to avoid bad weather. So making all these efforts, strenuous effort, but most importantly, biofuel. This is the most effective way to reduce. Mm.
Well, let's talk about the company Revo, that you're working as advisor, because they're a really interesting company, and they're trying to get the reuse of domestic oil
Mhm.
to make the biofuel. And they've been doing it for a long time, right? Based in Kyoto, is it?
Yeah. Well, actually, I just my term as advisor came to an end at the end of January. But yes, they've been doing. This is a very unique company. They do collect used cooking oil, mainly used vegetable oil, and they are collecting these from small restaurants and supermarket chains and all those places, well over 1,000 locations, not only around Kyoto in Kansai area, but in some Nagoya area, and they come to Kanto, Tokyo area too, to collect by themselves. And they do refinery. They have refinery in Kyoto, been providing biodiesel to. At one time, they were providing biodiesel to Kyoto Shie bus, Kyoto City bus, and also they were exporting some biodiesel to EU countries. So it is a unique company, and since few years ago, they've been working on developing aviation biofuels, which is totally different from biodiesel. And when it comes to aviation biofuels, then there is organization in the US, and you have to have this certification from this organization called ASTM, American Standard, and ASTM. TM stands for M stands for material. American Standard. Oh, it's on tip of my tongue. Anyway, uh, this is the only place. It's a university, certifies the biofuels. Mm. So Revo is now actually applying for ASTM.
That's great.
Mm,
I saw on NHK
mm,
um, that the Revo CEO
mhm,
was joining with other organizations in Japan, like ANA and GEL and
mhm,
other Japanese organizations in Act for Sky.
mhm,
So, in trying to make this biojet fuel, or this SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. So they need this certification from the US, but he has already tested it. The CEO of Revo, he already used it in race cars. He had a passion for race cars before, and Kyoto's garbage trucks are already using kind of a biodiesel that they've been making. So they've been doing it with domestic used cooking oil for quite a while.
mm.
It's really interesting. You were also an advisor with Euglena,
You,
another biodiesel company, is it?
yes, well, Yeah, ASTM stands for American Society for Testing and Materials. Now,
Okay. Yeah, you got it.
Euglena is another company. They already producing aviation biofuels, and they are the only and the very first Japanese company to use their Japanese domestic aviation biofuel on commercial flights. In 2021, 2 years ago, we actually loaded Euglena biofuel on Honda business jet on the commercial flight. Honda business jet is actually operating in Japan as a business charter. So Euglena actually used their fuel on Honda business jet. So this is the very first commercial flight operated by Japan domestic biofuel. So mm,
That's great. What?
Euglena
Yeah.
Euglena is a company. Well, Euglena it's a scientific name for small uh, like microalgae, like seaweed. Mm. And Euglena is making major business is producing nutritious supplement. I don't know if you have heard of midorijiru or aojiru, midorijiru. Euglena is midorijiru. Mm, mm, produce midorijiru. But
It's like
they already have.
Japanese wheatgrass. Like you have wheatgrass shots in America. Uh,
Mhm,
Japanese algae or green, very green drink, super healthy, right?
mm. Well, Euglena actually invested lot of money to build a pilot plant in Yokohama, and now in the process of building commercial uh, scale refinery, but not in Japan, but outside of Japan. To but Euglina's, you know, aviation biofuels used on commercial flight are not only containing not only Euglena oil made out of Euglena, but also used cooking oils as a feedstock. Mm, mm. So at the moment, I think used cooking oil is the most popular uh, feedstock. Yeah, and nobody challenges about the sustainability of used cooking oil because it used. Otherwise, it will be just thrown away. But when it's come to using other feedstocks like palm oil, okay, there'll be a lot of argument and a lot of challenges. Yeah, not only competing with the foods, but also social, element or this.
Yeah.
Or,
But because it's used, because it's a waste, you're reusing the waste. Nobody can argue with the
mm,
sustainability of that. But the one surprising thing in the NHK show, they were saying that a lot of the companies that have a lot of used cooking oil, like the fast food chains or
mhm,
the tempura shops probably all over Japan, they are already giving it to other businesses. It's used for farmers, use it for animal feed. Other companies are using it for different purposes. I always have the image that used cooking oil is a real hassle because it's very difficult to throw away.
mm,
But it sounds like it's kind of changed. The culture of it has changed in Japan, and people are actually really happy to take it and reuse it. So
mm.
that's a nice change in the trend.
Well, exactly. Strong demand for used cooking oils, as you likely put. Used cooking oil is used for animal feed, particularly the chicken. in chicken farming, I think used cooking oil is the most sort of welcome uh, the feed. So there is a lot of demand. So the prices, I'm afraid the prices will go up. It's happening not only in Japan, but like you said in Singapore, there is a Finnish company called Neste is building world largest refinery for biofuels, like 600 million project or something. So there's a heavy demand for used cooking oils because nobody challenges sustainability of used cooking oils.
Yeah, I'd never heard of the demand for used cooking oil. This is new to me. So if you eat French fries, if you eat tempura in Japan, you should feel good that you're going to help this new industry, huh?
Mm, yeah. So to stay happy, we have to eat more fried Kentucky, more McDonald's, more tonkatsu.
Let's change it to more sustainable food. Let's eat more soy meat karage and kurumafu karage and vegan fried food. That would be more sustainable.
Mm, yes, yes. Mm,
That's so interesting. But one other thing that was in the NHK program was a lot of the big chains are already selling their used cooking oil outside Japan. So it's very difficult to even use it domestically. I had no idea.
mm. Well, that's true. And like Revo or Euglena have to sort of compete with chicken farmers, and I understand there is a big subsidy from the Ministry of Agriculture for the chicken farmers. So the used cooking oil, the sellers are going to those chicken farmers because there is subsidy, so it will be more profitable to sell to, not to
Uh,
you know
I've never heard
Vivo
that.
or Euglena. So
Now
and
there's one different way to make it. It sounds like I was listening to a talk by Masaki Takao-san, and he was making fuel from clothing. So you can make biofuel from clothing, maybe because the clothes like polyester is made from oil. Is that right?
actually Japan Airlines, the company I didn't work for, I worked for in JAL once did that, collecting all disused crew uniforms or cabin attendant uniforms. Maybe they're synthetic or polyester. I don't know. But by burning all those, and there is a gas from gas to liquid, and all this process. We call these feedstocks. Feedstocks could be anything. Uh, of course, used cooking oil or sugar cane sugar or palm, or there are some less sort of controversial feedstocks like camelina, jatropha, which it doesn't compete with food and which grows in like desert. So it's less sort of controversial than palm or sugar based oils. So it's or during like last war in Germany did, doesn't have oil. They have coal. So they are burning coal and making gas to liquid, gas to oil. And all these, there are like 7 processes so far approved by ASTM, the certification. So there are processes different, and the feedstocks different. So, but used cooking oil is the most popular, and everybody want
Yeah.
used cooking oil as
Well, let's
yeah.
eat more French fries. I like that idea.
Mm,
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk. You are an expert on CSR. You've worked in the hospitality sector in Japan. How do you see that Japan's hospitality industry or the tourism industry, how could it change to become a bit more sustainable? Do you have a vision for the future?
well, to be sustainable, I think it's sustainable tourism. I think it's UNWTO sort of defined, but I don't remember exactly. But it have to be not only environmentally, but also it have to be sustainable tourism have to meet. I think it's right three conditions. One is economic growth. Then second is socio cultural the favorable, and finally environmentally sort of sound. It have to be it have to meet all these three conditions that to start with, and but uh, Japan has during Abe-san during his era, particularly from his second sort of administration in 2012. Japan was positioning the tourism as a core pillar of the economic development, the country's economic growth strategy, and 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 as like a joker, as a trump card for the vitalization of the local economies. Mm. So tourism, I think it's at the moment all these inbound visitors last uh, before COVID-19, we had the record high 32 million visitors coming to Japan, and our target still remains as in that 60 million in 2030. Yeah, yeah. Even after this COVID-19 outbreak of COVID-19, we haven't changed, so we keeping the same target. Uh, but to achieve this, there are many promotions going on, but most importantly, I think it's because it's the visitors, inbound visitors, who decide. No, it was up until like 2015, the government was leading the promotion Japan as a destination. Prime Minister Koizumi said the Visit Japan campaign. He launched that, and making all these gorgeous posters and promotion videos. But it it worked to some extent. But I think it's more important to appeal to each group and each nations. They have all different sort of ideas and different sort of concepts. So when it's come to visiting country, they these days for the last 10 years they're using social media. Social media is the most effective way of promoting your country, your town. So I often said, like all of a sudden one day there are every day 600 to 800 Thai visitors coming to small shrine in Oita prefecture, which I never heard of this. But these are through social media because people trust whatever is spread from their fellow countrymen, countrywomen by their own language. So the promotion is important, but how you promote, how you reach out to the people is more important. So the use of social media, I think the government is now, Japanese government is also realizing and doing social media, utilizing social media to the maximum extent. Mm. But when it comes to sustainable aviation, in Japan, like France, not as many as in France, but Japan has like 25 World UNESCO World Heritage. Out of 25, 20 are natural, 20 are historical sites, and five being natural site like Shiretoko or Yakushima, Ogasawara, or these. Mm. But some people, local people who were actually promoting and location for UNESCO World Heritage. Once they know the location, the city or monument is inscribed, they stop it there. But it's not right, you know. The target is just to be inscribed. No, once you get designated, inscribed as UNESCO World Heritage, you have heavy responsibility to maintain and preserve the site, whether it's natural site or historical site, historical locations. There are heavy duty to do that, and that's their responsibility to maintain, because whatever they succeeded from their ancestors, their generations ago, have to be transferred to next generation. Not only Japanese living in Japan, but for the rest of the world. They have heavy responsibility. Unfortunately, some of those campaigners don't realize their goal is to get inscribed. That is not the end. The most important thing is to continue, maintain, and preserve whatever the heritage they heritated. So,
That's a really good point, and I think the idea of having tourism which benefits local as well as visitors, having that balance is really important to sustainability. But absolutely, what you're talking about is very connected, right? Not just getting listed as one of the top UNESCO World Heritage
mm,
places that gives you pride, but how can local people benefit in terms of for their business or for their jobs, in their society being better, their economy being better, but also don't damage their local environment, which they also need for quality of life, right? So it's
mhm,
really interesting. You need that. UNESCO is really positive in many ways because it gets access to places that people wouldn't otherwise know about, probably, right? And it does preserve culture and it does preserve heritage. But you're right, it's not only about being listed, it's an ongoing effort, is very important.
yeah. Also, in the wake of this COVID-19, I think we should know people have more awareness of the protecting others' health. Yeah. So, like some mitsu, you have to avoid some mitsu, but equally, I think we have to have that mentality to make environment more sparse, not congested for the tourists. Yeah.
Avoiding crowds, yes, a very popular theme whenever I talk about sustainable tourism. I'm really impressed by, like, even Kyoto, the most famous Kiyomizu Dera, for example. They open up at 6:30, and when I went there right when they opened, I met a lot of local people who
Mm,
go there early when it's not crowded, and they enjoy going to these famous places for themselves as a local resident. And that was really wonderful to see that. And that's because of the organization thinking, how can we make some benefit for local people, right? So we also see that on Miyajima. Miyajima's most famous Itsukushima Shrine, they open at 6:30, and you see people who stay on Miyajima Island are able to go early, and people who come from the city, they can't make it there for that early time. So you're giving extra benefit to local people, but also giving benefit to the people who travel more sustainably. You're giving some value there. So I think those kind of strategies are really nice to see.
Mm. Well, obviously, a lot of those places, not necessarily in Japan, depending upon the tourist, the money tourist brings, and that actually, creates a lot of jobs and also local economy growth. So, but at the same time, over tourism brings problems, and of course, in some instances, they said it's like a pollution. And in Kyoto, I think quite lately, I think recently, they decided not to sell one-day bus passes. Yeah, because some locals, particularly the elderly people, complain about, they never ever able to ride on the bus because it's always full with the tourists, not necessarily overseas tourists, but Japanese tourists as well. So not selling those one-day coupon, but I think they are selling like one-day bus and subway coupons. So I don't know how it works, how it helps the local, particularly the elderly people who are afraid of getting on the crowded buses. But
That's it. The health and the overcrowding, that's a really important point. Hiroshima has started a special sightseeing bus. So to give a bus just going to the sightseeing places, and then that takes congestion and overcrowding away from the regular buses as well. So those are other ideas that could be tried in other areas, definitely. We just have a few more minutes. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about, Terazaki-san?
uh, so I don't know, jumping from aviation biofuels to other topics, and where we started with what's happened at Tokyo Metropolitan Government, and but well, in, again, I like to stress, but well, ginkgo trees, maybe some of trees may be saved, but the entire landscape, what's the value to this attraction is not only the ginkgo trees, or not only that uh, picture gallery. It's called Meiji Kinenkan Picture Gallery. It's an entire landscape, and that's create a great tourist attraction. And without Ginkgo Tree Avenue, it's no longer Jingu Gaien. It's a different, and and I stressed that this point during this press conference at the Tokyo. For Japanese, turning sort of leaves in autumn from green to yellow or red. It's we've seen. I grew up with those beautiful koyo here and there in Tokyo, but for overseas visitors, particularly those coming from Southeast Asia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, having distinct four seasons is something they don't have, and they really appreciate far more than we think they might. So it is a great experience for them, great tourist attraction. So why do we change it? Why do we scrap and build the new things? Why don't we, preserve whatever is appreciated by everybody? Nobody complains about falling leaves. Somebody have to clean, but it's a great work, but it's so beautiful. So I don't know. We are so fortunate to have all these distinct four seasons. Winter, spring, summer, fall. But for many overseas visitors, it's a luxury to have four seasons and the beautiful scenery, changing scenery. Yeah. So I think it's not the trees, not the building, but the entire landscape have to be preserved. That is the value. Mm.
Yeah, I agree, and we've had projects here in Hiroshima too. Old, very beautiful heritage old buildings, beautiful old trees being redeveloped, and not much discussion with local people about how we should redevelop it, what should be saved, what do we value, why is the rush? And I feel that for your campaign for Jingu Gaien as well. Why so much of a rush to change it? Like you said, when nobody's complaining, everybody loves it. Why change it, right?
Exactly. Well, there is obviously business reason, and you know, maybe it may create some jobs during the construction. Yeah, but in the long run, you might what you might gain is much smaller than you might lose. So that's
And you can never get what you have now. You can never get that back in the same value, in the same way,
mm,
right? Yeah, that's our hour. Thank you so much, Terazaki-san, for joining and sharing. Like you said, we jumped around so many different topics, but I think it all has the underlying foundation of sustainability, value for society, value for the environment, and
mm.
value for the economy, and what's the best way forward. So I really appreciate your insights and your perspectives on SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, and the tourism industry and Jingu Gaien. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Joy. Thanks for having me. Yes, I really appreciate this opportunity. And, right.
Wonderful.
Well,
Thank you
I
so much.
enjoyed talking to you. Thank
Oh,
you.
great. Wonderful talking to you. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And see you again next time. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank
Likewise.
you. Bye.
Bye.